I am Anil Kumar. Welcome to my series on Pre-Algebra, where we are talking about few important concepts which we should know before getting into algebra. Now, fractions is a very important part. We'll refer this as rational numbers soon. However, we need to review some concepts and also learn some shortcuts, or you may call them as tricks, to solve some multiple choice questions based on fractions. So the idea here is to understand, rather review the concepts, right? And probably get some new tips on it. So in this particular video, we'll look into rearranging fractions. So fractions could be set in order, ascending or descending order we'll talk about. And here there are four variety of questions which we'll be taking. The very first question is, between any two fractions, we need to decide whether they are related with less than, greater than, or equal to sign. Then we'll have a slightly complicated set of fractions where denominators are very different and you need to arrange them in a particular order, right? And then we could have some word problems, very simple ones, just to understand how to look into word problems. And the last question here is to arrange the fractions on a number line. So once you put the fractions on a number line, you can easily see the order in which they occur. Now, if you have any difficulties or any questions, you can always send me an email. My email address is also given here. Now, let's look into these questions one by one. The very first question here is, replace each this blank with less than, greater than, or equal to make a true statement, right? So we have to replace with these signs to make this statement a true statement, right? Now, to begin with, this sign is for less than, correct? And this sign is for greater than. So when I say less than, greater than, it really means that we know 7 is greater than 5 and 3 is less than 5, right? So that is what we mean. Equal to, you understand, both are same, right? Now, here are three questions. I would like you to pause the video, answer, and then move forward. Let's see the first one. How do we do this? So we have two fractions, both have different denominators, right? So we have 3 over 8 and 6 over 24. How do we compare them? Now at this stage, you actually have learned about fractions. We are kind of reviewing. So what I will suggest here is that if you see a fraction like this, you could actually simplify this and write in lowest terms. So one of the idea here is to write in lowest terms, right, to find solution to such questions, right? So writing to lowest terms means here we do see that 6 is a common factor. So I could divide both by 6, so I get 1 over 4, right? So that is the lowest term. So what I did here was that I divided both numerator and denominator by 6. So once you do that, 6 divided by 6 is 1 and 24 divided by 6 is 4. Well, still what you see is that the denominators are not the same. So how do you compare it? Well, at this time you need to have the same denominator. So we'll use the word common denominator, right? So we'll say we should get common denominator. Most of the time, we refer to the term least common. Correct? So that is kind of critical. Least common denominator, or we sometimes also use least common multiple, right? So they are related terms which we'll be using at times. Now, what could be the least common denominator? Here the denominator is 8 and here the denominator is 4. So the least common denominator for the given example, let me write here, least common denominator here should be 8. So we are actually looking for multiples, and that's why I gave you LCM, lowest common multiple. So you have to check the multiples. So basically, to make now 4 as 8, what should I do? I will multiply both by 2, correct? And get my numbers, the fractions, with the same denominator. So if I do that, I get 3 over 8, and 2 times 1 is 2, and 4 times 2 is 8. Now we have the same denominator. Now once you have the same denominators, you can easily write down the answer by comparing the numerators. So 3 is greater than 2, so you will write this sign here that this fraction is greater than the other fraction. Correct? So once you have common denominators, now compare numerators. Right? And then write down the answer. Well, I took so many steps to do a very simple question. You might think about it like this, right? However, these are very important steps to consider when you're working with fractions. So one thing which we learned is how to simplify a fraction. So that was the step where we learned how to simplify a fraction, right? So that means write in the lowest terms. That is what it means. Then we learned how to make the denominators as common, since when we want to compare, that is an essential part. Even to add and subtract fractions, this is one of the most important part. Once you do all this, then you could actually compare and come up with your answer. Does it make sense to you? Right? So that is how you could do it. Well, some of you could also do something here. Since we need to have a common denominator, you could actually multiply right in the very beginning these two terms by 3. Reason being that 8 and 24, you see that the common denominator is 24. So you could multiply them by 3, the first term, resulting into 9 over 24 and 6 over 24. And then also you could have got the result, since 9 is greater than 6, right? So instead of doing all these steps, you could have done that. So this method is with the common denominator, you can compare and find the solution. Perfect. So I will call this as one of our tricks, right? So this is our tricks. That at times you could just do this. Good. Now here we learn the ultimate way of doing it, right? Now you must be thinking like this is taking too much time. How do we solve such questions? So many steps to go around, right? But if the question is only to compare, right, and it is a multiple choice question, so what could be the ultimate tip to do it? So let's call tips. Now the tip here is you'll definitely love it, and we call this as cross multiplication. You have learned these standard ways of doing it. Now see how with cross multiplication we can answer this particular question in just a second, right? So cross multiplication really means that we just multiply the numbers across. So 5 times 4 is 20, right? And on the other hand, what do we have? We have 6 times 3. Now 6 times 3 is 18. So which is greater, 18 or 20? Well, you get your answer within a second, and you know it should be 20 greater than 18. So immediately you can write your answer. Do you see that part? So cross multiplication is the ultimate way of comparing fractions. Now whether the denominators are same, different, doesn't matter, right? Well, if they are same, you know, just compare the numerators as we were trying to do in the first example. Now here, that is the way you should be doing it. So I hope you got the concept. Now if you are given a new question, what will you do? Well, the choice is clear. We'll do cross multiplication, right? So if I multiply 8 with 7, the number I get is 56. And if I multiply 12 with 5, I get the number 60. We know 60 is greater than 56, so our answer is very clear. You got it. Perfect. So that is how we will be solving this question. So I hope in the very first question you learned some cool tricks to solve multiple choice questions. So you're getting prepared for a higher level algebra by going through these set of videos. So that is where this particular video or all the videos in this set are very special. So go through them thinking about the concepts and also what tips you could use to solve similar questions in no time. So I hope you understand and appreciate it. Let us now take question number 2. Question number 2. Order the fractions from least to greatest. Well, you just learned a tip which was cross multiply. Now, when there are more than two fractions, you cannot cross multiply, right? So the trick learned cannot be really applied everywhere, right? So you need to know which trick to apply where. Now, if you're given this kind of a question, what should you do? Well, as we said, the basic operation is to have the lowest common denominator. To find the lowest common denominator, what should we do? We need to find a lowest common multiple, right? Now, to find the lowest common multiple, what can we do? So we'll talk about this in question number 2. Now, we are looking for the numbers which are 5, 4, and 2. Well, the multiples of 5 are 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and so on. For 4, the multiples are 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, and so on. And for 2, it is 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay, so 10, 12, okay, 14, 16, 18, and we finally get a number which is in all the 3. So what you notice here is we need to get lowest common multiple. Now if I look into very simple numbers like 5, 4 and 2, what simpler than this could you have? You find that the techniques learned so far is write all the multiples and then check which are common. Oh my god, this is common. Okay, 20, 20, and then finally you do get 20 as a multiple of 2 also. So then you get your LCM as 20. So that could be your lowest common denominator. You get an idea. But all this takes a lot of time, right? But anyway, this is definitely a method to be used to find the lowest common denominator, right? Now, once you do that, then what do? Then you need to have equivalent fractions, right? So now we again go to the concept of equivalent fractions. That means we need to write all these fractions with lowest common denominator of, in this case, 20. So how do you make denominator as 20? As far as the first term goes, let me first copy these terms and then we'll see how to make them 20, right? So we have 2 over 5, the other number is 3 over 4, and then we have the number half. Now to make them 20, what should you do? Well, here we have to times by 4, correct? Here we have to times by 5. And here we have to times by 10, correct? To make them 20. So finally, you do get them as 20 in the denominator. 4 times 2 is 8, and here we get 15 over 20. And then we do get 20 and 10 on the top. Now, once you get these numbers, then we can order from least to greatest, right? So let me now write down the answer. The least out of this is this one. So that comes first, right? And, sorry, this is the second one. The first is 8 is the least, and then 10, and this is the greatest, correct? So now we will just write them. So we have for this 2 over 5, that is the least, and then it is 10 over 20, which corresponds to half, right? So half, and then it is 3/4. Correct? So to understand, these are the steps which are involved to arrange fractions in a particular order, right? Do you see how we have arranged it from least to greatest? So that is how you should be doing it. Now, of course, all this takes a lot of time. And so how could you cut down on the time? So we need to learn a good technique for LCM because this really takes a lot of time, and we need to also learn about the last part of writing equivalent fractions. So if you master these, then you really cut down on time. So now let's see how to find the LCM in a faster way. All right, so this is not a wrong method of doing it. It's perfectly fine. So now let's work with these numbers 3, 6 and 12, which are kind of equally simple, but still to learn a technique, they're very good, right? So how do we find the LCM? Now this is called ladder division method, right? So what we do here is we actually factor out or divide by the common factors. Now let's look into the three numbers which are in the denominator. These numbers are 3, 6 and 12. Now you need to look for numbers which are common in all. So 3, 6 and 12, well, 3 is common in all, correct? So in that case, I could divide them all by 3. So 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, and 3 times 4 is 12. So we have reduced our numbers to 1/3. And now what we could do, we still see that the numbers shown here have something in common. So they have 2 in common, right? But you cannot divide 1 by 2. So write it as such. You could divide 2. It goes 1 times and 4 goes 2 times. So what you get here is 3, 2, 1, 1 and 2. If you multiply these numbers, let's do 3 times 2 times, there is no point writing 1 because multiplication by 1 is the same number. It is multiplication identity. Okay, so let's just multiply by 3, 2, 2. What do you get? 3 times 2 is 6, 6 times 2 is 12. Well, it looked kind of obvious. But anyway, what we found here is a method of doing things. You get my idea, right? So we do get 12 as our lowest common denominator. So this is the first step. We learned a method, ladder division, to find the lowest common denominator. Now we'll go to the second step. So we did the first step, which is how to find this number, and we know this number is 12 for us, right? So the lowest common denominator is equal to 12. Now let's go to the second step of writing an equivalent fraction, right? So how do you write an equivalent fraction? Okay, to write the equivalent fraction, we basically need 12 in the denominator. So I could just write a straight line common to all of them and write my denominator 12 here, right? So I made a common denominator. Now these are my 3 numbers. To make the first number denominator as 12, what should I do? Well, I have to times this by 4, right? So we are going to do this in our mind. So 4 times 3 is indeed 12. 4 times 2 is 8. So the first number gives me 8. You get the idea. For the second number, 6 times 2, so we have to multiply this by 2. So we get 10 here. Here we already have 12, so we just put 7. Do you get the idea? So we save time in making 3 different fractions and then doing the whole process. So it saves time. That is very critical when it comes to multiple choice questions, right? Even when it comes to our thinking, it gives you clarity of thinking, right? Okay. Now can you compare? Yes, of course. We know this is the lowest, right? This is the next, and then it is 10. So we can easily write down our answer, and that should be 7 over 12. And then the first number, which is 2 over 3, and then the middle number, which is 5 over 6. So that is how we get our numbers in a particular order. Does it make sense to you? Correct? So I hope you got the tricks of doing these things, and that is a very important tip. Now I would like you to pause the video, answer this third part yourself. Correct? Practice how do we find lowest common denominator and how do we write this as an equivalent fraction with same denominator, right? And then write down the order in which they should appear. If you're arranging them in least to greatest, it means ascending order, right? Okay, so we also call this as ascending order. Okay, so let's do it quickly now. Now again, let's do the first part of finding the lowest common denominator. We need to take all the 3 numbers in the denominator. They could be divided by 5, right? If you cannot divide 3, just write it as such. 5 times 1 and 5 times 2 is 10. Now we need to multiply these three numbers. So that is to say 5 times 3 times double of that. So 15 times 2 is 30. So what you get here is a common denominator of 30. To make this as 30, you need to multiply by 10. So you get 10 here. To make 5 as 30, you have to multiply by 6. 6 times 2 is 12. To make 10 as 30, you have to multiply by 3. 3 times 3 is 9. Now you can arrange, this is your first number. So you get 3 over 10 as your least. And then higher to that is the first number. So 1/3. And then 2 over 5 is the maximum. Right? So that is how you are going to write your solution. Does it make sense? You must have compared that when you graduate from here to there, all of a sudden you have cut down the time by which you can solve similar questions to 1/3, and that is what we are going to achieve. So if you follow my series on pre-algebra, they are really going to help you for tests like SAT or similar multiple choice test papers. I hope it makes sense. And now it's time to take the third question. Now, third question here is basically a practice test question for you. You need to write in descending order. Descending means decreasing, right? So you have to write the highest number first, right? And then it decreases to lowest, right? So that is the whole idea. So I'd like you to pause the video, write the solution for this particular question, and then look into my suggestions. So I hope most of you must have got the solution. Let us see how to solve it. So the first step is to find the lowest common denominator, right? So what are we going to use? We are going to use the ladder division method to find the lowest common denominator. So write all the numbers in the denominators, and then we need to divide them one by one by something which is common between at least two of them, right? So to see 5 is common between these two, so we could divide by 5, right? So if I divide by 5, I get 5 times 3 as 15, 5 times 1. These numbers are not multiple of 5, so just copy them as such. Now you could actually divide by 3, right? So let's take 3 now. So if I divide by 3, what do I get? 3 times 1, 1 as such, 3 times 4 and 2. Next is to divide by 2, right? So when you divide by 2, you get here 1, 1, 2 and 1. So you know now what is the lowest common denominator. So the lowest common denominator is actually product of all these numbers. So it is 5 times 3 times 2 times 2, right? We don't have to write ones because that will not change the answer, right? So easy calculations, that is the second part, right? So we know 5 times 2 is 10, so we should actually do that, right? So think like this now. So we know 5 times 2 is 10, and we know 3 times 2 is 6, and that gives you 60 as your answer. So whenever, even if you have that step, think in a way where you could save some time. So that is another tip which you learn in this particular video. How to multiply numbers and save time. Perfect. 5 times 2 is 10, so I did that first rather than 5 times 3, 15, and then doing all that, correct? And I did 3 times 2, 6, and then multiplied 6 with 10 to get 60. Once you practice, all these things will come automatically to you, correct? So we did our step number 1 of finding the lowest common denominator. Step number 2 is what? 2 is to rewrite as equivalent fraction. Perfect. Now equivalent fractions means same denominator is our purpose. So we'll try to make the denominator as 60. Correct? How do I get 60 from 15? That is my question, right? In our mind, we're thinking like this, right? How do I get 60 from 15? Well, the answer is very clear. I need to multiply by 4, right? That is what I need. So I'll multiply 7 by 4. So I have to multiply this 7 by 4. So I get 28 here, correct? Next number is 5 in the denominator. How do I get 60 from 5? I have to multiply by 12. Now, that could also be a challenge at times. How do I decide? That is difficult, right? So 5. So what you could do here is, now this is another very beautiful tip. You have the number 5, right? You have this number 5. Now these numbers you multiplied. So you already have 5. What you need is these 3. Do you see that? Which is 3 times 2, 6 times 2, 12. So that is how you could get 12 here. So multiply by 12, this number 3, and write down 36. Does it make sense? So your list of multiples here will guide you what number to pick. Does it make sense? Right? So that's how it is, right? So you learn more tricks. So now we have 12 in the denominator. Obviously, it should be 5 since we did 5 times 12 earlier. So we'll multiply this times by 5. So 5 times 5 is 25. And if it is 2, which is 30 times 2, half of this, so that number becomes 3030. You get an idea. So you get equivalent fractions with common denominator, with lowest common denominator. So that is what your second step is. Second step is not just writing equivalent fractions. It is writing equivalent fractions with a common denominator. That's why I made this long horizontal line to emphasize we need denominator of 60 for all of them. Is that clear, right? Now, the answer is to be written. That is simple and final, most important step. As you can see from here, we are going for descending order. Highest, the greatest number in this is second number. So 3 over 5 comes first in our list. After 36, it is 30, which is the last number. So half comes next. And then it is 28 and 25, the first and the third number. So we should take 7 over 15, the first number, and then 5 over 12, the third number. So that becomes our solution. Does it make sense to you? Now this type of question is a very important question from any test point of view, and probably these are the most efficient ways of doing it. So that is the part of learning in our pre-algebra. I hope you understand and appreciate it, right? Now, let's take the next question, which is our question number 4. Now, this is again a practice question. The order is ascending order, increasing order. So what we're trying to do here is to arrange these numbers in increasing order. Now you can actually pause the video, answer this question, and I'll take a short break. So we'll just enjoy the wildlife of Canada, right? It's not really wild. It's just within the city, the wilderness, right? And then we'll get back with a fresh mind to solve the rest of the question and learn some more tips. I hope that sounds interesting. So meanwhile, you can actually provide me with the solution, and then we'll see how to do this question, right? So I hope you enjoyed the beauty, Today is the first day of spring, and this day is marked with some very beautiful birds which return. And this is the local merganser, so I normally drop the name local. I use this beautiful merganser. It just stops over before moving north. So I think you enjoyed the courtship of 5 beautiful birds. 2 of them were female, the white ones were the males, right? Now let's begin and continue rather with where we left. We're looking into question number 4. Write in ascending order all these fractions. So I hope you must have got them right. The first step is, of course, to find the lowest common denominator, right? So let us see how to do that part. So we're talking about this ladder division method, which by now you must have learned. So this is 12, 6, 4, and 16. First number I could go with is, it's good to take prime numbers, right? So if I take prime numbers, it takes more time. So I'll take 4, a bigger number this time, right? So 4 times 3 is 12, but I cannot divide 6 with 4, so I have to leave that, right? So I'll write 6 as such, and then 4 times 1, and then I write 4 times 4 as 16. Well, again, we could actually divide by 2, and so what we get here is we cannot divide 3, so we'll write it as such. 6 can be divided by 2, so we get 3 here, 1, and then 4 divided by 2 is 2. Now we have 2 numbers where 3 is common, so we'll divide by 3, correct? So you get this. So at times you could use a higher number if 2 of them are getting simplified. It could be done, right? Now let's multiply these numbers to get the lowest common denominator. So the lowest common denominator for us is product of 4 times 2 times 3 times 2, right? So here, how do we multiply is another important aspect. So let's multiply with the smaller numbers first. So we can go from this direction since 4 is a bigger number, right? So we'll do this as 2 times 3 is 6, 6 times 2 is 12, and 12 times 4 is what? So we get 4 times 12, right? So that should be 48, right? So 4 times 2 is 8, 4 times 1 is 4, 48. So we did our first step, and that is to find the lowest common denominator. And the second step is to get the equivalent fraction with a common denominator. Perfect. So we need a common denominator. So in this case, the common denominator for us is 48. It's a very big number to work with, but we can still do it. So 12 times 4, so we have to multiply 11 by 4. So this gets multiplied with 4, right? So we will multiply this one by 4 and write 44, correct? Now 6 times what? So what you could do is you could just take away 6, left with 8. So this should be multiplied with 8, and 8 times 5 is 40. And the next number is what? Well, 4 is in the denominator, and if 4 is in the denominator, it should be multiplied by 12. 12 times 3 is 36, correct? Now the last number here is 16 in the denominator. 16 means you take away 4 times 2 times 2, you're left with 3. So you have to multiply this by 3. 9 times 3 is 27. Did you understand how I got the multipliers? Right? That is again a very important strategy to think about, especially when you're working with at a higher level and you need to do things very fast, correct? So that is what you need to cultivate as we move forward, right? So the idea is to efficiently answer our question. Now you have your numbers in ascending order. Means what? You have to write in increasing order. Ascending means increasing order. Yeah. Sometimes students may just do a mistake at the last step, writing them in different order, right? So that is not the purpose. So we should know exactly what these terms mean. Okay, so ascending means increasing, right? So increasing order means we have to get the least here. So which one is the least? 27, the last term. So we'll write 9 over 16. And then 36, so 3 over 4. And then 40, that means 5 over 6. And then 11 over 12. Correct? So that is how we could actually do it. I hope it makes sense. Perfect. By now, you must have reduced your time of answering such questions by at least 1/4, and that is what we achieve. Correct? Now let's look into different types of questions where we are again doing arranging or something like this. So it's a word problem. So you might see some word problems in this fractions, and we've taken a very simple one here. Question number 5 is, Sophia is looking in her closet. If 2/3 of her shoes are black and 3/4 are brown, does she have more black shoes or more brown shoes? So it is basically, if you look into it, we have 2/3 of her shoes are black, right? And 3/4 of them are brown, right? So total shoes, right, brown. We are looking into, does she have more higher number, right? More black or brown shoes? This is what? Comparison. We started with the very first question in this way. So the best way to do here is cross multiply, right? So just cross multiply, and what do you get? You get 8 and 9. So we know this is higher. So we have the answer, brown shoes are more. Does it make sense? So that is how we are going to answer this type of question. Perfect. So let's take another word problem just to practice. So you can pause the video, answer the question, and then look into my suggestions. Correct? This time the question is, in a recent survey, 2/5 of the people surveyed said their favorite food is pizza. So we get a number 2/5, and that corresponds to pizza. So when you read a question, you could actually write your notes. Favorite food was pizza. 1/4 said it is hot dog. So let's write HD here. And 3/10 said it was burger. Let's write B for the burger. We have to now compare three fractions, right? So how do we do this? Well, one way, of course, we learned is to find the lowest common denominator. The numbers are 5, 4, and 10. So 5 goes, 4 doesn't go, right? So that's what it is. And 2 times will give us 2 and 1. 5 times 2 and 2, 10. So lowest common denominator is indeed 10. Right. So the next step here is to write all these numbers with denominator of 10. How do I get 10 for 5? I have to multiply by 2, right? So we get multiply by 2. It becomes 4. How do I think I did something wrong. So because that doesn't work. Okay, so no need to rush like this. So what we should do? We should multiply 5 times 2 times 2, which is 20, not 10. So sometimes in a rush, you might do a mistake. Perfect. But you know what? You get corrected as we move forward. So we are actually looking for 20 to be the lowest common denominator. So how do you get 20? So if it is 5, we have to multiply by 4, right? So we have to multiply by 4. 4 times 2 is 8. Well, that's correct. Now 4 goes 5 times. So we'll multiply by 5. We get 5 here. 10 goes 2 times. So multiply by 2, you get 6. So again, we get an order. So now, which food was favored by greatest number? So favored by greatest number, we need to look for the highest number. Greatest number here is 8, so it is pizza. So we get our answer, and it is pizza. Does it make sense to you, right? So in a multiple choice question, I could have given you these 3 choices. The right one is definitely pizza, right? So that is how you could do it. Now here, since we had been working in fractions, we wrote the answer like this. Now as we complete our pre-algebra, well, next chapter will be decimal numbers. Now fractions could be written as percent, as decimals, right? That is going to be our next talk. So what you could also do is convert them to decimals. Now it is not easy to convert them to decimals, but with these examples, it is indeed easy. So if you divide 3 by 10, you get 0.3. Do you see that? 1/4 is a quarter, so 0.25. And 2/5, think like this, you can multiply both by 2, so you get 4/10, So that means 0.4. Does make sense to you. Think more. 2 times 2 is 4 and 5 times 2 is 10. So now it becomes kind of similar. So 0.4. Perfect. So out of these numbers, which one is the greatest? The greatest number is 0.4, which corresponds to pizza, and that becomes our answer. So now you also see how different techniques might just help you. So we are working in fractions, and at times the fractions are, in a ways, better to convert to percent or in decimals, and then we could get our answer just as we saw here. So if that is the case, don't follow this method. Follow this method. You could convert them to decimals and compare and get your answer. Perfect. So that is another strategy which you should keep in mind as we move forward with our pre-algebra. The last question here is, order the following fractions on a number line. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We will see how to put these fractions on a number line. This is a very important exercise, and sometimes a direct question like this could be there in your test paper, right? We have seen that all these numbers are positive, so we'll start with 0, and all the numbers will be on the right side. So they are all positive, right? So that is why we will go to the right side. If you look at the numbers, it is 1, 3, 1 over 3, 2 over 3, 3 over 2, 1 over 4. Now this is a mixed number, right? So we have a mixed number here. So mixed numbers are those which have both fractions and the numbers in it, right? So that is the mixed number, correct? Now in this case, this one is called the proper fraction. Then we have a proper fraction. Now these are important terms which you might need to know, right? So proper fraction. But in the next term, we have 3, which is bigger than 2. So we call them improper fractions. Right? So that is how you should see the fractions also, improper fractions. So when it comes to improper fractions, that means we could actually write it in this form of a mixed number, right? So that is what we should also think about. However, we do see that in the denominator, we have to divide and 1/3 in halves and 1/4. So let's say this is 1 for us, and let us say this is 2 for us. Now let us see how to do first number, which is 1 over 3, right? So now we are looking into this number, 1 whole. This means 1 whole and then 1/3. So from here, you go 1 whole and then 1/3 of the whole unit. So you have to divide this into 3 equal parts. Do you see that? So we have 3 equal parts. So each is 1/3. So you to go to the first part, so there you go, and this number will be 1 whole 1 over 3. Does it make sense to you? Perfect. So you get your first number on the number line. Correct? Let's look into the second number, which is 2/3. 2/3 means it is less than 1. So you have to divide the first part, 0 to 1, into 3 equal parts. And then you go 1/3 and 2/3. So this number is 2/3. Perfect. Is that clear? Now, let's look into the third question, which is 3 over 2. Now, when I say 3 over 2, as I said, if I divide 3 by 2, I get 1 whole and a remainder of 1, kind of like this, right? So that is how we convert improper fraction to fractions, right? So we'll talk about this in details in another video also. I'll provide you with a link on this. So 3 over 2 is 1.5. So you could also say 1.5. So how will you plot this point? So you have to go here 1 full and then halfway. So between these two, we have to locate a point which is halfway, and then that becomes your answer. So that becomes 3 over 2. Is that clear to you? Correct? So you have to divide that part into 2 equal parts and go to the first one. Right? 3 over 2 means 1 whole and a half, and so that is how you do it. Correct? Now let's see the last portion, which is 1 over 4. How do I mark 1 over 4? In this first portion, we have to divide into 4 equal parts. So let's do half first and then half of half, right? So half of half, kind of like this. So this portion is the first quarter, right? So we have 4 portions, 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? So this portion is 1 out of 4. Does it make sense? So 1 out of 4 is less than 1/3. Do you see this? This portion is 1/3. So 1 quarter is less than 1/3, okay? And that is how you mark it on your number line. Perfect. So once you have them, they are ordered, right? You could order them in increasing or decreasing. We are not specifically asking that. So the order here is definitely 1/4 is the lowest, and then we have 2/3, and then we have 1/3, and 3/2. Correct? So that becomes the order for us. If not specified, we could write them in increasing order. Does make sense to you? So I hope this exercise brings all these things about arranging fractions in a particular order. It could be ascending or descending. Ascending means increasing, descending means decreasing. We learned few strategies to solve such questions. One of the most important strategy here is to, let's go back to our sheet. If you're given just 2 numbers to compare, cross multiplication, right? So this strategy is cross multiplication. Okay, if you are given more than one number in order, we have to find the lowest common denominator, and then we have to find equivalent fractions and then compare. In case of word problems, we have to write them in that form, kind of understand, and then do it. If there are 2 numbers, you could do cross multiplication. If there are 3 numbers, as with this example of food survey, you will have to adopt the second method. And on a number line, we learned how to place the numbers on a number line. Numbers on the left are decreasing. And as you move forward towards the right, they are increasing on a number line, right? So these are some important tips which you have learned, and I hope that makes sense. If you have questions or suggestions, please don't hesitate to email me on the address given here on this page, anil.anilkhandelwal@gmail.com. I hope that makes sense. Feel free to write your comments, share your views, and if you like and subscribe to my videos, that'd be great. Thanks for watching and all the best.